Beat 'em up games are a dime a dozen on the PlayStation, with quite a few titles being released on the system that date all the way back to the early months of the console's launch period. But during this time, unfortunately, beat 'em ups were going through somewhat of a decline. It's only in more recent times that they've started to see a resurgence, as with a lot of dying genres, because people are starting to understand these long forgotten concepts and are starting to appreciate them for what they tried to do. Like, we will never forget games such as the iconic Streets of Rage series and Final Fight, as they are among some of the greatest ever in the industry, and they are the games that set the bar for everything else that was to precede them. But during the PlayStation's lifespan, for the first few beat 'em ups that were released, mainly in Japan, they were usually 2D entries that looked, felt and played very similar to the Streets of Rage games seen on the likes of the Sega Mega Drive. So it would be a while before we would see our first 3D entry into the arena, and that would come with Fighting Force, that was released in 1997 for the PlayStation, Windows PC, and would later get a port on the Nintendo 64 in 1999. The game had been in development for the Sega Saturn also, but its entry was cancelled towards the end of its development. But originally, during the early stages of Fighting Force's development project, the game's designer's core had originally gone to Sega with a pitch to create the game as a potential fourth entry for Sega's Streets of Rage series, but Sega declined, explaining that they had their own plans to continue the series, but as we all know, that took quite a long time. So it would have been interesting to see where that would have went, but at the same time, people kind of stuck to what they know, and people really didn't like to see their favourite series being transitioned into modern day concepts. It would have probably not went down so well, but then it might have done. It depends. But it took a long time during this period, even though the PlayStation and the 32-bit era is among some of the most popular ever, but it definitely took players a long time to adapt and to really understand and respect the main differences in many different games genres that were starting to appeal in popularity. If we look at the likes of RPG games, it wasn't really until the likes of Final Fantasy VII, Breath of Fire 3, Parasite Eve, among a few others, that really started to hit home with how popular RPG games could be. But that still left us with a wanting for a need to revisit some of the older ideas of the past. So with Fighting Force, it tries to do that, but at the same time tries to be new and original, as it was one of the first ever 3D beat 'em ups to be released, and coming from the same developers as Tomb Raider, that in itself was something to live up to, giving you the access to play as 4 playable characters through urban and futuristic style environments to battle waves of various oncoming enemies, where you can utilise various weapons from knives, bars, guns, rocket launchers. Literally the entire environment around you in a level can be destroyed or used in some way to your advantage. As if you've ever played any previous or old school beat 'em up games, you'll know how fast paced and just frantic they are with their gameplay. Everything is just sheer mayhem. So the goal, regardless of the 4 characters that you utilise, you have a mixture of balanced gameplay styles. Some are a lot more athletic and flexible, while others are a mix of in between and well balanced, while others are a lot more stronger but slower in how they move, very like earlier beat 'em up games. So there's definitely a play style to suit each player, and the goal is really to take down a criminal mastermind who is trying to cause an apocalypse to destroy the world. So it's your job to take him out once and for all, but in order to get to him, you have to go through all of his minions and all of the corrupt officials and everything that's corrupt within the city that you're in. And the hype, especially in the magazines towards Fighting Force, was very well documented and was overly positive, but when the game finally got released, it did receive average to mixed reviews, many stating the lack of originality but the repetitiveness of the gameplay. But I think more to the point that the gameplay, while it plays well to a certain degree, the use of the camera angles and the use of trying to control your characters in 3D left sometimes various combat sequences to feel a little bit off-putting and sluggish, as it could take a while for characters to move around the screen, and you'd have to get used to knowing where the button combinations were to make full use of every moveset that was available. And really, I think what it was is the fact that at that time, gamers were still not used to playing games in 3D, and especially playing this type of game in 3D left a lot to be desired, and people just didn't really take to it. And that goes back to what I said earlier, with a lot of players just really not taking to different ideas with regards to their favourite style of games from the past. People are so used to a certain dynamic that they usually kind of stick to it, and in many cases, unlike today where there were quite quite unwilling to give new things really a try. Well, that can still be seen today, but people are a lot more open to different dynamics. When we look at the plethora of games that are being released, even games that originally were 3D now going back into 2D and vice versa, they're mixing up their styles so often that you just don't even really think about it anymore. Whereas back then, if you tried to do something different, it was always a tough gamble as to how it was going to be received. But regardless of the potential flaws of Fighting Force, it is a decent solid game, and quite honestly, when we think of the amount of 3D beat 'em ups out there, there's very few of them on the PlayStation to begin with. If you really dive deep into looking for them, there's only a handful of them out there, but this is definitely quite possibly the best one, or among the best that's on the system in that category. It does have some great features. The multiplayer aspect, if you're playing cooperatively, is a lot of fun. It does have its own battle mode as well, but it has a great mix of like level design, being able to choose different points. So when you get to certain points in the game, you have the ability to be able to choose to go to different types of levels. So you can choose whatever direction you choose will determine which environment you're going to end up in. You can end up from docks to bridges or warehouses. It's all down to choice. So there's plenty of replay value in order to keep you wanting more, so that you can try and find all these areas. Plus, in many of the environments you're in, there's usually always hidden secrets that you wouldn't see to plain eye. It's not until you've hit something or smashed a window or seen something explode off in the distance that you would blow open a hole in a wall or a shutter somewhere that it would expose a new room or a new area to explore that will give you more access to weapons or items that you can use. So that in itself, there's also an explorative element to it as well, which is worth checking out. The game is decent, like I can't fault it. If anything, I always found it really enjoyable, even from the first moment when I played it. Originally, our first experience with it growing up was when myself and my brothers and a couple of my mates, we rented it out one weekend, and it hadn't been out that long, and because of the fact is we were such huge fans of Streets of Rage, like I class Streets of Rage 2, even though it's not a PlayStation game, because I grew up playing it, I still class Streets of Rage 2 on the Sega Mega Drive as one of my top 5 favourite games of all time, and quite rightly so. It's an absolute masterpiece. Great visuals, great gameplay mechanics, great use of characters, enemies, and plus for me it's got one of the best soundtracks ever in video gaming, hands down. It's so good that I still go back to play it regularly, and I still listen to the music often because it's just absolutely incredible. But going back to Fighting Force, we actually had a blast with it. Now mind you, it took a few attempts to really figure out the gameplay mechanics and to understand what to do and to try and improve our skills, but we all had a really fun time with it. If anything, we rented it out a couple of times a few weeks later and gradually just kept playing it because we enjoyed it that much, to a point that we were eventually able to finish the game, so we persisted with it. So for me, with co-op games on the PlayStation, I would definitely put it up there as among some of my favourites. Even just multiplayer games in general, Fighting Force is definitely a good game to play with your mates. If anything, that's probably the best way to play it. Like, it is decent to play on your own. Mind you, it does be difficult and you probably will need to use the cheat system in order to get the best out of it, but where the best fun is had is definitely playing with a group of your friends, hands down. It is a very fun title, it's very solid, it's a worthwhile experience. If you're a fan of beat 'em ups, yes, it is in the early days of 3D with regards to this genre, but it's definitely worth a play in my book. I can't recommend it enough. It's just a lot of fun, and whatever you can say about the graphics, I know it was made by Core Design, and I know the games that they had made were often known to be quite blocky compared to other games that you would have seen during that period, but I always liked that style. I always thought there was something quirky about it, and it really just suited the game's aesthetic, in all fairness. Like when you look at the early Tomb Raider games, like they were blocky, but it didn't matter, people didn't care because it was Tomb Raider. It was just such an iconic series. Now I know Fighting Force doesn't really compare, but if you do like the visual style with these lesser detailed graphics, it's still something to enjoy in most respects. But if you do enjoy beat 'em ups, give Fighting Force a go. And if you have played it already, I would love to know your thoughts of what you think of it overall. Did you play this on the PlayStation? Did you play it on the PC? Or did you have the N64 version? And what did you think of them overall? I'd love to hear whatever stories you do have of this game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated of future content. And if you would like to see more videos that I've covered on the channel around other types of beat 'em ups that were also released on the PlayStation, then check out the playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.